Welcome to Call to Action with Robert Lewis Jr. and the Boys and Girls Clubs of Boston, the podcast where we explore how bold ideas and meaningful initiatives are shaping brighter futures for young people. Each episode will bring together leaders, change makers, and inspiring voices from our community to discuss the critical challenges and the opportunities that are driving positive impact in our city. This is your call to action.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Robert Lewis Jr., Nicholas, President and CEO of the Boys and Girls Clubs of Boston. I'm very excited to have Derek Gallagher, Executive Director at Charlestown Boys and Girls Club, Charlestown legend, like really a legend in our communities, joining us, as well as Andrea Swain, our Chief Impact Officer, also a community leader and legend in our communities. Tonight, we're going to engage in a conversation. We want to hear about their history, them growing up in their neighborhoods, their work at the Boys and Girls Club, but also how they can provide some perspective and tips as we're really moving forward and like some future thoughts about Boston and the Boys and Girls Club. But I really want to start this off, and the first question I want to ask each of you is, can you share just a little bit of your history of like growing up in the neighborhood?
I'm Andrea Swain. Thank you for having me here, Robert. I'm excited to share that I was born in Roxbury, went to the Boys and Girls Club when I was 6 years old, when it was the boys' club and girls sat on the sideline. The Boys and Girls Club has been a part of the fabric of my life for over 50 years. As a young child going through busing, it was the Boys and Girls Club who inspired me, who encouraged me, who taught me leadership skills. And so fast forward, as a young adult, I worked at the Boys and Girls Club, the Roxbury Club in teen time, bringing young people from public housing to the Boys and Girls Club. And then fast forward, I became a leader at Boston Housing Authority and part of the redevelopment team for the Orchard Gardens community and the Mission Hill community. And from there, I came back to the Boys and Girls Club as executive director, the second woman only in his history at that time, and just excited to be a part of the fabric of Boston, growing, leading, and ensuring that the Boys and Girls Club of today had the same magic when I was that 6-year-old girl.
Oh, I love that story. Thank you for sharing. Now we'll go over to Derek. Derek, I'd love to just hear of your history growing up in the neighborhood as well.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be on the first podcast. But yeah, Derek Gallagher, Executive Director at the Charlestown Boys and Girls Club, lifelong club member, club alum. I grew up 2 blocks away from the Charlestown Boys and Girls Club, and I tell people I have 3 memories. I remember in front of the club when I was younger, had an incident with a dog. I'm petrified of dogs. My father bringing me to see Jaws as a 5-year-old. I'm infatuated with sharks. And I remember the first day I ever walked inside the club with my dad bringing the day I turned 6. And I was blown away. I couldn't believe how I finally got a chance to be in the club and become a club member. Spent my whole entire life up there. If you see my college and my high school yearbook, it says that I'm going to coach University of Michigan basketball team. It didn't quite turn out that way, but I actually love what I do. I love the community I work for. I love the organization that I work for. I love the people that I work with. My parents actually met in front of the High Street building at the club back in the early 60s, so I like to tell people I'm literally walking DNA of the club. If my father didn't like vanilla cupcakes and walk up to my mom as she walked out of the girls' club, I might not be sitting there right now. But it's an honor to be here. I love the club. I love what it does for the community in this city, in this state. So thank you.
Thank you both. I'm going to bring you back, okay? Can we go back? I want you to think back about your time when you were young and you were like active members of the Boys and Girls Clubs. I want you to think back, how did that experience and those experiences shape you to who you are today? And I'll just pause and let you think about that. And maybe, Derek, I'll start with you, but I want you to really think back when you were young. How did the Boys and Girls Club shape you then to who you are today?
I would say 3 things. One was the Charlestown Club is smack dab in the middle of Charlestown, so no one owned the club physically. It wasn't a side of town. It wasn't in a housing development. It wasn't in a certain area. So everybody, when you came to the club, and I know this, it used to be looked at as kind of derogatory. You were just a club kid. And still true that day. You walk through the door, you're a club kid. And to me, there was relationships with staff. And at that time, now we have 33 staff. We do everything. Our staff are the most amazing people in the world. Back then, I'm guessing it was probably half of that amount of staff. There was limited resources. The buildings were beautiful, but the club was trying to do what they could to hang on. And for me, it kept me and my friends, as we became into teens, it kept us out of trouble. And when you look back, Boston was a dangerous place. Charlestown had its issues. There was murder, there was gun violence, there was drug use. And the club saved me, my group of friends, my family. If you stayed with the club, you can almost see the path of success and the trajectory. And for those that when you turn a preteen or earlier. So to me, it's personal that I firmly believe that I'm here on this earth and successful and have a great life because of the club. But also the relationships you made with other clubs. At that point, it was only Charlestown, South Boston, and Roxbury. And if you played on the ball hockey team, if you played on the basketball teams, which I did, you got to go into a van and go to Roxbury. And that was the only time I got to go to Roxbury. And I loved it. We all loved it. I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to Roxbury to play hoop. We're going to South Boston to play basketball. They're coming to us. And you got to meet people from other parts of the city, which to me was fantastic. And there are relationships that I still have to this day that I have with people because I went to clubs 30, 40 years ago. One of them being Howie Bunkley, who Andrea, we all know. Howie Bunkley was one of the first African-American human beings that I had ever met. As a 6-year-old, he would come over on Saturday afternoons and he did a cooking class for us. He was the most beloved human being on earth. We waited at the top of the stairs for him to show up to come do a cooking class for us because I know from
you're hungry too, and
we were hungry.
Something,
listen, you got to eat, but you also got to he let you make one. You could bring it to your favorite staff member. So it really encompassed. It opened up my eyes to a whole other world and other communities. And to this day, I still think we do the same thing, except for on a much larger scale.
And right before Andrea, Derek, I can relate to what you just said. Being a young person at the Legions Boys and Girls Clubs in East Boston, the first trip that I ever took at 12 years old outside the neighborhood was coming to the club. And I remember when I first got this job and I went to visit Charlestown, I was talking to Derek and I was like, oh my goodness, I played here as a 12-year-old kid. And the Boys and Girls Club provided that experience of getting outside our neighborhood. So, Miss Andrea Swain, when we go back, how when you were thinking young, how did the clubs help to shape you to who you are today?
I'd say the Boys and Girls Club really gave me a voice because it was the boys club and the girls at that time, we sat on the sidelines. And it was my sister, who's younger, was like, why do the girls have to sit on the sidelines? And I stood up with her and said, yeah, why are we sitting on the sidelines? Just because we're girls? We can't learn how to swim. We can't play basketball. And the adults were dumbfounded. They said they'd get back to us. And then the next day, they said we could do swimming, we could go to the gym, and they gave us more opportunities. And it taught me then that you have to stand up and speak up. But fast forward as an adult, when I really look back on my childhood, the club was that safe space. It was like magic when you walked through the door. All the adults knew your name. They were proud of you when you bought your report card. They had standards and expectations that they wanted you to meet. And we really worked hard at meeting those expectations. So it was like, you must go to school. You must behave. So those were just requirements that the staff said that to you. And so it's different hearing it from an adult who's not your parent, but it was this place where you went, where all the staff, people knew your name. You met amazing people like Howard Bunkley, who taught you how to cook, he did more than teach you how to cook. He taught you to have relationships with other people. He taught you how to have manners and use food as a way to bring community together. And that's what I try to emulate when I was at the club. So when you walk through the door, everybody felt like they belonged. Everybody felt like they wanted to be a part of the club. Where you were a member, a staff person, a donor, you wanted to be engaged. And that's the club that I grew up at.
Yes. Derek, you said some earlier that, I'm going to ask both of you these questions, the name of our clubs are the Charlestown Boys and Girls Club and the Roxbury Boys and Girls Club. You know, I'd love to hear from each of you. You know, when you start thinking about the neighborhood, you know, and you start thinking about you growing up and even our history of Boston, Derek is just saying, like there was violence, this, that, and the other, and Andrea, there's violence, and there was busing and all of these things. What role did the club, and what role does the club continue to play as an anchor in our neighborhoods? And Andrea, maybe I'll start with you on this.
Okay. The Boys and Girls Club, especially in Roxbury, has always been a beacon of hope and an anchor institution. It's always been on the forefront of sort of activism and embody a place for young people in the community to gather. Whether you were a young person or a senior citizen, there was a place for you at the Roxbury Club. The club, you know, when it was a lot of violence in the neighborhood, the club was on the forefront of working to solve those issues and problems by making the space available, by partnering with different foundations and agencies. The club has always been the largest youth organization in Roxbury, always had the most number of young people came through the doors of the Roxbury Club. It's been a place where generations, you'll find that a 6-year-old, their father, their grandfather, or their grandmother came to the club. So it's this generational place where people find space and where people advocate for the club. If you go to any of our clubs, you'll see that the place is impeccable. There's no graffiti because the club has this high esteem in the community that it is the number one place to be in. And the clubs has evolved to meet the needs and challenges of young people. Whether it was busing, it was a refuge for young people. Whether for safety, young people needed to learn to swim. Whether we needed to advocate around gang violence, provide opportunities, jobs, our club was like the number one teen employer, employing up to one point in time almost 150 teens over the summer. So the club has always met that challenge. When MCAS became an issue, the club sort of pivot to provide more academic success programs, tutoring programs, college prep programs, SAT prep. So each time there's a challenge, the club is there to meet the challenge of young people today.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. Ooh, that gives me chills. We love that. And, you know, Derek, same question. We start thinking about the clubs and in our communities and like the Charlestown Club. What is the role of the club, you know, in Charlestown?
I mean, the club in itself, and I tell this to my staff, I tell my families, my members, to me, it's all about relationships. The ones that you had 40 years ago, now amongst each other. You know, we had 1,100 members last year. And I tell my staff, we all agree, that's 1,100 different kids that have different needs, that have different wants. But our goal is to make sure most of our members here at Boys and Girls Clubs of Boston, we see at 6 years old, and they're with us through 18. So they're literally someone that we see every single day for years and years on. It's to find out what they want to do with their life, who they want to be, let them be who they want to be, and get them on that trajectory to lead a successful life. I goof around now after the pandemic and stuff going. Our job is literally to infect these kids with empathy and love and goodwill and go out into the world and spread it. We as a club, my club itself, that's what we say, and I truly believe that. I think relationships with our staff. I work with the absolute best people in the world. 33 of the best people you will ever meet. And our kids show up day in, day out because they love those staff. We have beautiful buildings, we have great facilities, but it's the relationships that, like I said, to this day, we still keep. And there's pressure, I think, on me. I mean, we're 132 years old. I've told people over the years, newcomers that have worked with me, and if you do something great for the club, you're going to be recognized. People are going to be thankful and happy because there are so many people that came through the club and their families have come through. If you do something that's not on the up and up for the club and we're not doing the right thing, we're going to hear about that. And I appreciate that. I do. There's a pressure on us to make sure that we continue this standard. And I think we're in a fantastic place right now, and what we're doing the last couple of years is stepping up our game, and it's always the best when things are going great to strike and let's move on something else. Let's try to implement this. And the big thing that I appreciate from the whole organization is we can meet whatever need. If something happened tonight and we had to change our what we wanted to do tomorrow, it would happen. Our number one job is to make sure when we show up the next day that we are doing everything we can to make our members successful. And we have the backing of our board, our staff, our downtown staff. So we're blessed. And like I said, I'm happy and glad, and I've never had a bad day in my life getting up going to work. I don't know how people do it otherwise. I get to go to the building I grew up in and try to do the same exact thing.
But Derek, you've also have seen a change, like from the Charlestown you grew up in, and Charlestown has evolved, right? And how have you and your club responded to the change of Charlestown and the young folks you're serving?
Going back to the 70s and 80s, I mean, Charlestown was primarily a white Irish Catholic community. Starting in the 90s, when there was violence all across the city, we were having minority families that were looking to move to Charlestown. And even at that point in the early 90s, the club made a decision. And I don't think people know this. And the club made in the early 90s, we bought a bus. So to make families welcome and not have to worry about transporting themselves or any fears they may have, we ran a shuttle, going around town, picking up families and dropping off at the club. Wow. And that was early 1990s.
That's a great story that people need to hear.
Yeah. And you move into a new community, you don't really know your surroundings, you don't know, and that's what the Charlestown Club did. Now I tell people we're probably the most diverse club in the country. I don't have the specific number with every club, but I guess that we're up near the top with, and I love it. I mean, Charlestown still does have 3 housing developments. And it also has $1 million condos. And again, the one equalizer is you walk through those doors, you're a club kid. And that is the message we have. That's the message we had. And we're going to make sure everybody gets to where they need to go.
And Andrea, you think of it as what Derek was saying about the evolution of Charlestown. Roxbury's going through this right now. But I'd love you to share a little history because, there was a shift. There was the Roxbury Boys and Girls Club to the Yawkey Boys and Girls Club. So can you share a little bit about how that shift occurred and how, the club is adapting to a changing area of Roxbury or Dudley to Nubian Square right now?
So, the club was growing. We needed to update the facility to bring it into the state of the art. So when we were fundraising and looking to do this, because the project started out at $300,000, and by the time we finished, it was a $7 million project. And because Katrina had happened, so the escalation of all the supplies and everything really changed the fabric. The Yawkey Foundation came forth and wanted to help. They heard about the stories, and the community at first was up in upheaval. About the name of the Yawkey Foundation, primarily because of Tom Yawkey. And they didn't want to be associated, the Roxbury community, with Tom Yawkey. However, over time, it was a lot of controversy. The politicians. The good thing is our parents understood the condition of the building and had really worked with us. So we were able to calm different people down in the community. But it was an uproar in terms of why would we put the Yawkey name on a building in Roxbury. And so over time, we were able to overcome that with the Yawkey Foundation. And the community has evolved. As you know, Roxbury was labeled and associated with gangs and violence and crime, to now $1 million condos. Houses are going $1 million. Still have public and HUD housing that surrounds the community, but it's rapidly changing, rapid income changes. But the one thing, like Derek said, what the equalizer is the club. And so you can live in $1 million condo or you can live in public housing. Everyone's a club kid. It provides not only diversity and inclusion. Our clubs are international city. You'll have people that come from anywhere from Africa to Italy that has settled in our neighborhoods, and they see the club as the beacon of hope. It's the one place, because one key thing about Roxbury, because of busing, a lot of young people are bused out of the neighborhood to go to school. There's still a significant number to go to Boston Public Schools, but the club is where there's really a community where people can come in the neighborhood and know their neighbors. And so I want to say that the club continues to evolve. It continues to be a place, no matter what your race, your gender, your sexuality, your ethnic group. It's a place of belonging. And we create that at the club.
You know, this is great hearing from you both because, you know, sometimes people can define, what the clubs can mean, what neighborhoods can mean. But what I love about both of you, we've sustained, some of Boston's big issues, some of Boston's biggest challenges, some of the issues that were dividing neighborhoods. And, I love, Derek, what you were saying is, your connection with Howard Bunkley and then coming over to the clubs, and Andrea, like, even though busing had an impact, but your role and impact, with Charlestown and Southie, those are incredible stories, but it also shares with us that we can let those other defining moments, like, define us. So as I start thinking about defining moments, I'm going to ask each of you, I'd love you to share a defining moment for you at the Boys and Girls Club, one, and then another defining moment of the club. So one for you personally, and then what was that, a defining moment that you may have experienced, witnessed, or seen at the clubs? Andrea, we'll start with you.
You want to start with me? Okay. A defining moment for me at the club is, I think I was around 10 years old, and Yvonne Irving was the director of operations at the time. And she came forth with so much leadership and class, and she was telling all of us, you can be anything that you want to be. You have the aspiration. And she just kept telling us all the time that we're amazing and that we could achieve. And she was running the Boston shootouts. They were planning for the Boston shootouts. And it was just amazing to see this woman with all this power and just encouraging. And I said, you know what? I want to emulate that. I want to be a woman of presence and encouraging other young people to be the best that they can be. So I think personally, that really shaped like the course of my life. I wanted to be that beacon of hope for others. And then on a professional level, I think there's been a couple of moments, but when one May Fripp became the first woman ever in Massachusetts to be an executive director of a Boys and Girls Club, I think as being one of her mentees, I think that was like very aspirational for me. And then looking at the young people at the Boys and Girls Club who, I'm not going to say beat the odds, but who others had counted out to achieve greatness on their own, despite their zip codes, going off to college, going to exam schools, getting 4-year scholarships, being first person in their family, first generational college student. It's just amazing to just watch our young people when they're giving the right ingredients and the water and the relationships, how they flourish.
Thank you for sharing both the personal and professional. Derek, when you start to think about yourself, love to hear, what was a defining moment for you? And then we start thinking about the clubs, another defining moment.
All right, I'm going to take the easy way out on this, but the defining moment for me, honestly, is because obviously I'm the executive director. I've worked there for 35 years, but was still that first day that I became a club member. That's my personal defining moment, that I got the opportunity to walk in that building and become a club member. From a club standpoint, again, I'm going to say I think it's the day-to-day, every minute of every hour with my staff, the incredible things that they do. And I firmly believe that. I say, like, I tell people, if you want to come find out what the club's about, I can tell you, but just walk in my door at 4 o'clock. You'll hear it, you'll smell it, you'll see it. And that's from day to day, every minute. I always say the easy thing is to roll out a ball and open up a gym. The hard thing is to grab a ball, break up teams, give in pennies, put on a whistle and a referee's shirt and put on the clock and have a game for them. And my staff always, and the Boys and Girls Clubs of Boston always does the hard thing. It's the easy thing is to do that, and we do the hard thing. But I think if one particular, I'd say we were March 11, 2020, we were the first really organization that got hit with COVID. We had somebody that was attached to Biogen, and I was on the phone with the local Boston Public School and with the principal, and we were like, all right, we'll be done with this by Monday. She's like, hey, I'm going to drop all the food off at 6 in the morning. We're going to drop all the books. Can we leave it outside your building? And me and a few of my staff were there. And from that on, which we thought was going to be a few days, it was months and months and obviously years that we all went through. But I think that was a turning point for the organization, because I think as an organization, we realized the personal connection that we have to all of our kids, whether we were doing Zoom at the time and coming back at a quarter of our attendance and then half and then full. I think that changed for everyone in this organization the importance of having face-to-face quality meaning programs, at least with my club, and I know with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Boston. So I think as an organization in 132 years, that was the one thing where everyone just stepped up, and there was never a step backwards or like, hey, we want to try to not do this. It was always pushing forward and doing whatever we can for our families and members.
As you're both talking about our impact on our young folks, our impact on communities, your personal impact, and the role that the clubs play in your neighborhood despite challenges. When you think of the clubs back in the day when you were, coming up, or thinking back at the clubs when you were first, like early employees, and you see what a club is now, what is your hope, for the future of the Boys and Girls Clubs?
I'll give that one a go. I do think we just continue to grow, continue to give our staff the skills to grow, which I think with the trainings that we're doing and the helping people achieve their personal education goals and whatnot, is to continue that. I mean, whether it means adding more staffing so we could make smaller classes, building wise, adding whatever we can. I think it's still always, as I said earlier here, it's always growth. I think you strike while things are going great, and I think that's what the organization is doing right now. I think as an organization, when we all leave, we have to leave it in better hands and in a better shape than when we got it. And even if you told me 10 years ago some of the classes and things that we're doing for kids right now, I would have thought you were out of your mind. We're doing a French class. We're doing a floral design class. We have not one but two Dungeons and Dragons classes. We have an esports class. We have an anime class. We have a Pokemon class, photography class. We have all of that, and that's on top of music. That's on top of 97 kids on swim team. There's really nothing we don't do. So even with the incredible staff that I work with, you're always looking for someone who comes at stuff from a different angle with a different and whatever it is that they like to do personally in their life, you hope that they'll take that passion and pass it along to our kids. And we've seen it. We've seen kids get into Boston Arts Academy, get into certain schools, and trajectory is what they want to do when they get older for their careers. So I think it's constantly evolving to whatever one the needs of our kids are, but kind of thinking outside the box too on stuff.
And your hopes and future for Boys and Girls Club moving forward?
I think the key thing around hope for Boys and Girls Club is that we're always meeting the challenge of young people, no matter where they are. When it was gym and swim, we were there. When it's like homework first, we were there. Providing music opportunities, now providing, education, college, advancement and exposure to college, workforce development. I feel like the next iteration for the Boys and Girls Club, while we have our brick and mortar and That's going to be like our number one foundation. I think the future for us is how do we reach those young people who are not actually at the clubs? How do we have like mobile clubs that can go in neighborhoods that we're currently not in? How do we go into public housing developments and reach those young people who won't come up to the clubs? And so I think the future of the clubs is going to be going where the young people are, keeping our brick and mortar foundation, but really looking at new ways and new approaches. And how do we use AI? How do we use technology to meet young people and to bring them closer to us and for them to be a part of this economy? Boston is an international city. How do we bring our young people who live in the city of Boston and Chelsea a part of that larger fabric of work community? And so that's where I see the next iteration for the Boys and Girls Club. Still bringing the hope, still keeping our buildings filled, but for going outside of the box to get those young people.
Yes, I have a couple more questions. I'm going to end on one, but I'm going to go back. If you were to able go back, and what guidance or advice would you give your 12-year-old self?
Whoa. Invest in Microsoft? In Roxbury and Charlestown real estate?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that's a good question. I think if current right now talked to 12-year-old Derek and told him where the club was at and what we were doing, I think my jaw would drop and say, probably, why can't we be doing this now? And I realize that we've taken the leap and made enormous investments to. I think that I tell myself that, hey, it's exciting stuff coming. Stick around, stay with it. These buildings, these communities, the city of Boston, and again, we had spoken to this before, that I think the city of Boston, which is the safest large city in America, I 100% every ounce of my being believe that that's because of what we do with the Boys and Girls Club. So I would tell myself, hey, you're gonna love what's coming. You're gonna be shocked by it, and you're gonna have a huge smile on your face like I do right now. But no, it's good stuff coming.
Love that.
I would tell my 12-year-old self to relax. I was pretty intense at 12 years old, in that, the world was a very confusing place, but it was going to get better. Race relations in Boston, was going to get better. That I was going to fail in schools, and I knew that at 12 years old, because I was doing more reading on my own than I was getting in school. And I said, something's wrong with that picture. And so I would tell my 12-year-old self to relax, take advantage of every opportunity, and the world is going to be a better place. The world is going to be a better place because we have Boys and Girls Clubs who are encouraging and who are doing the silent fight behind the scenes of encouraging young people, giving young people opportunity, and shaping the city of Boston. The Boys and Girls Club don't get enough credit around how they brought the city of Boston together, how Charlestown, Roxbury, and South Boston would come together. And being a 12-year-old and seeing that, even though I couldn't be on the diving team or the swim team, I was there cheering my godbrothers on and would see the kids coming from Charlestown and South Boston. And so it gave me a different reality from what I experienced going to school and what I would see at the Boys and Girls Club.
So I think of what you would tell your 12-year-old self. So much of it has evolved to who you are today. You said hang in there, you did. You hung in there. And not only did you hang in there, you're the executive director and this incredible community leader. Andrea, you're talking about South Boston and, in Charlestown. Back in the day, nobody could see that. Nobody would have seen back in the day that you and Derek would be sitting here together as leaders of the Boys and Girls Club leading this city. So your 12-year-old self and those counselors, supporters, folks in the Boys and Girls Club set a tone to where we're going to be today. Each of you have an opportunity right now, and I'm going to actually take a second to think about this. For all of our listeners and everybody who's thinking about this, and we think about what you said, Boston, but where Boston was, where Boston is, but Boston to meet its potential. I want to give you both the last word. What would you tell folks about Boston if you wanted to amplify anything, in your message to our Boston community, which is business, college, prospective members, anybody else? But you have this opportunity, your final message, and what's your message to our great city of Boston and Chelsea?
I would say, we had almost 1,100 members last year. They're all the most amazing young kids in the world. They really, really, really are. And I think what we do gives them an opportunity to find what that is with them, to expand on it, and that what we see, hopefully, the rest of the city of Boston sees. We're here to make them successful. Whether it doesn't matter what they're going to do, but as long as they're successful at it, we're happy. But we really do we have all these, myself and my team, my coworkers, we have side, conversations all the time about, oh my gosh, I can't believe how great this one is. Or we did it the other day with someone who's 18, struggles, some struggles. Where she is at right now, I met with her and said, you have a career at this. You found your calling. She's working 10 hours a week for us as a teen associate, but she found her calling. And I said, just stick with us. We will get you there. Whether you want to become a teacher, stay with the clubs. So I think all of our kids have that story. And what I say to people, when you do come through the club, it's $25 a year. It's $5 for teens, which even we both know with the $5 for the teens, we don't even collect that. It's like, as long as you have your paperwork, that's what we want. Is what my mother taught me, my dad taught me was, with the club, you just better pay it back. You better come back, whether you went off and got a job in government, or you're working at Fidelity, or you're working at Putnam, or you're on the Boston Police Department. Go back to the club. You are what we want them to be. Come back and talk to the club. Give us a connection. It doesn't matter. We're not asking for a job. We're asking to say, hey, just where's the foot in the door? Boston, a lot of it, good or bad, is kind of who you know, who can put you in touch with someone, who can get you an interview, who can do. So my father always preached that, and I still believe that. Just making sure that we have those kids. We have those kids with those talents, and making sure that as they get older, we have, hopefully fit inside what Boston's offering.
So you heard Boston before I get to Andrea. Believe in us, we'll invest in these young folks, and we're developing incredible leaders and incredible talent and folks that are going to do great things, not just in Boston, our region, and around our country. So invest in us and believe in us and believe in our young people. Andrea.
I want to say, in terms of amplifying, the Boys and Girls Club is the place to be. It's where the cool kids are. It's where the nerdy kids are. It's where the kids who are struggling. It's where the kids who are advancing. It's where a kid can just be a kid. Oftentimes, in the city of Boston, it's difficult being a kid or a teenager. And the club is that one place where you can thrive. If you're doing well, we want you to achieve higher. If we're struggling, we want to help you get to that place. The club, we can't do it alone. We need investors, we need donors, we need volunteers, we need people on our boards, whether it's the trustees or the advisory board. We're part of the whole fabric of the community, and we're having an impact. I don't know what Boston would be without the Boys and Girls Club.
True.
Because if you look at around any Boys and Girls Club, the crime is low. And people care. It's a place where people really care. And that has an impact on the city of Boston because oftentimes the city of Boston doesn't have a good reputation, but the Boys and Girls Club do. Mm-hmm. And when you say the Boys and Girls Club of Boston, people look like, wow, that's an amazing organization. And that organization is having a real impact on Boston and Chelsea. So I would say, join us. We need you. We're part of a Boys and Girls Club movement. And in Boston, we are the movement.
Folks, you just heard from two young folks who grew up in the neighborhood, two young folks who paid it forward, two young folks that took advantage of opportunities to become leaders in our communities, two young folks that have built a pipeline and a future in our city. And these are two perfect examples of why if you invest in the Boys and Girls Club, you get leaders like yourself. We're going to take this time to thank you, Derek, and thank you, Andrea, for your incredible leadership and all you do on behalf of our young folks, our communities, and the families. We are making a difference, and we are worth the great investment, and you've heard this from Derek and Andrea. So this wraps up our first podcast, The State of Our Youth. Please continue to join us as we continue to amplify voices, talk about the issues, but celebrating the greatness of our club members, our alumni, our staff, and other leaders that are partnering with us. Enjoy the rest of your day. Good day.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.